Samantha sat in front of the vanity mirror, running her fingers through her hair as she tried to steady her breathing. The dim light in the room cast a soft glow across her reflection, but she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the strap of her dress, the fabric feeling tight against her skin, like it was suffocating her. She was supposed to meet Tom for dinner in less than an hour, but tonight, everything felt wrong. How did I get here? She thought to herself, staring at her own reflection, trying to make sense of it all. But the answers were elusive. All she could see was the woman who had just spent the last few hours staring at a screen, sending texts she couldn't take back, trying to suppress the flood of guilt and regret that now consumed her. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, and for a moment, she didn't want to pick it up. She knew exactly who it was. You ready? You're gonna look amazing tonight, I just know it. I'll be there in 10. It was Tom, her husband, the man who had loved her, the man who had never once doubted her. He had no idea what she had done, the secrets she was keeping, the lie she had built. No idea that, just a few days ago, everything between them had changed, perhaps irrevocably. Samantha glanced at the message again, her stomach twisting. Her fingers hovered over the keys, wanting to reply, to tell him what she had done. But the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't. Not yet. Not when it was all so fresh, so raw, when she hadn't even made sense of it herself. Instead, she reached for her phone and typed back a quick, perfunctory reply. I'll be down in 10. She sighed, feeling the weight of the decision she had made settle deeper into her chest. She had to face Tom tonight. She had to look him in the eye, and yet the guilt crushed her. How could she? How could she tell him the truth? The man she had been with, the one she had betrayed him with, had no place in their life. Yet, somehow, he had become her life, a part of her she couldn't undo. It all started innocently enough, or so she told herself. Samantha had been a freelance graphic designer for years, working from home. But recently, she'd been feeling disconnected from her own life. The passion that once burned between her and Tom had begun to flicker, leaving behind a coldness she couldn't ignore. Tom's job kept him away for long hours, leaving her to face her loneliness in silence. That was when Alex came into the picture. He was a photographer, talented and confident. Samantha had known him for months through a mutual friend, but their conversations had always been casual. It wasn't until he mentioned a new project he was working on that things began to change. He asked her if she'd be interested in modeling for a photo shoot. At first, she was hesitant. She hadn't been the same woman who once took pride in her appearance. She wasn't sure if she even had the confidence for something like that. But Alex was persistent. He was charming, gentle, and when he complimented her, it made her feel seen. He told her she was beautiful, that she had the perfect body for the concept he had in mind. He made her feel alive again, something Tom no longer did. It was supposed to be professional, just a few pictures, nothing more. Samantha hadn't planned on what would happen next. The shoot began, and Alex's gentle encouragement soon turned into something more. He took photos of her, but they weren't just of her body. They captured something deeper, something Samantha had buried for too long. There was a connection, a chemistry, between them that neither of them could deny. Every compliment he gave, every touch of his hand as he adjusted her posture, made her feel things she hadn't felt in ages. It didn't take long for the photo shoot to blur into something else, a moment of desire, an urge to escape the monotony that had settled into her marriage. The kiss had been slow at first, unsure, but the more their lips met, the more she forgot the world around her. It was reckless, intoxicating, and when they had crossed that line, there had been no going back. Samantha had slept with Alex that night, and it wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. It was everything Tom no longer made her feel. The first time Tom had asked her about it, she had lied. She had said she was tired, overworked, that nothing was wrong. She was a master of deception, and Tom, in his trust for her, had believed every word. But it wasn't enough. She hadn't been able to stop herself from seeing Alex again and again. The affair became a secret, one she couldn't keep buried. She began texting Alex in the middle of the night, sneaking away from Tom for secret meetings, always lying about her whereabouts. The guilt was constant, eating away at her, but the need to feel desired again, to feel seen, outweighed the shame. Samantha had fallen into a world of lies, where Tom was the oblivious, loving husband, and Alex was the man who made her feel something that Tom couldn't. But tonight the walls were crumbling. Samantha couldn't keep running from the truth anymore. As she glanced at herself in the mirror, she realized the woman who had been so sure of herself, the woman who once prided herself on honesty, was gone. All that was left was a woman who had broken her marriage, broken her husband's heart. She had to tell him. But how? Could he ever forgive her? Could she forgive herself? When Tom came downstairs, he was smiling, just as she had expected. He looked at her, his eyes warm, filled with love. "You look incredible," he said, his voice as sincere as always. Samantha forced a smile, feeling the weight of her betrayal as if it were a physical object pressing down on her chest. She took his hand, trying to ignore the shaking in her palms. They walked out the door together, heading toward the restaurant they used to go to. But as the night wore on, everything felt distant. The laughter they shared felt hollow, as if someone had pulled a thin veil between them, muffling the connection that once was so strong. Samantha was here, physically present, but emotionally she was somewhere else. The conversation was light, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere dark and heavy. And then, as they sat across from each other in the quiet corner of the restaurant, Tom suddenly asked, "Sam, is everything okay? You've been off for a while now. It feels like you're not here." His words hit her like a brick. Not here. She wasn't here. Not in the life she had with him, not in the marriage they had built. She was somewhere else, somewhere she shouldn't be, with someone she shouldn't have allowed into their lives. Samantha took a deep breath. The words she had been avoiding for weeks suddenly felt like they were bubbling to the surface, impossible to hold back any longer. "Tom," she said, her voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Tom's face changed, concern flashing in his eyes. He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Sam, whatever it is, you can tell me." She felt the weight of it, the betrayal that had become a part of her. She swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. I've been seeing someone else. I've been unfaithful. It was with someone I met through work. I never meant for it to happen, but it did." For a moment, Tom just stared at her, his grip on her hand tightening, his eyes filled with disbelief, and then, slowly, his face fell, the color draining from it. The room seemed to close in around them as he pulled his hand away, his expression hardening. What? His voice was barely a whisper, the hurt in his eyes cutting deeper than anything she had ever seen. "How could you, Sam? How could you do this to me?" Samantha's heart shattered as she watched him. The man who had always believed in her, who had trusted her with everything, was now broken before her. She had done this. She had destroyed their love. "I'm so sorry, Tom," she whispered, but he shook his head, the pain in his eyes more than she could bear. "You lied to me," he said, his voice growing more distant. "You told me everything was fine when it wasn't. You've been lying to me for how long? And for what? For him?" He gestured vaguely, as if the whole situation was too much for him to comprehend. "I never meant to hurt you," Samantha said, her voice breaking. "But I did, and I can't take it back." Tom stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He took a few steps back, as if physically distancing himself from her. "I don't think I can look at you the same way anymore, Sam. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She reached for him, but he took another step away, shaking his head. "I need some space. I just can't do this right now." As he turned and walked away, Samantha felt the last remnants of their life together crumble. She had no idea how they had gotten here, but she knew it was too late to fix it. Samantha sat motionless on the couch, her phone lying face down on the coffee table, a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. The silence of the apartment felt suffocating, every corner echoing with the ghost of Tom's last words. She hadn't expected him to leave like that, without the fury she'd imagined. He had left quietly, almost as if he had already said goodbye in his heart long before the conversation. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sam." She kept replaying those words in her head as if they were a final verdict on everything she had been, everything she thought she could still be. He didn't scream, he didn't throw anything. He simply let the silence stretch between them, filling the space where love had once been. He had walked away without looking back, and for the first time in her life, Samantha felt entirely alone. What had happened? She thought about the affair with Alex, the way he had come into her life like a storm, intense, compelling, and somehow, for a moment, everything she had wanted. Alex had made her feel like a woman again, beautiful and seen in ways that Tom had stopped doing for months, perhaps even longer. But now that she had crossed that line, it was like a door had been shut in her face, the finality of it all hitting her hard. The apartment, once filled with the laughter and warmth of their shared life, now felt like a cold, distant place. It was as if Tom had taken the light with him. She couldn't even bring herself to look around the living room, the coffee table where they had shared so many lazy Sunday mornings, the couch where they had laughed at the TV, even the kitchen where they had argued over who would cook dinner. Everything felt like a reminder of how far they had fallen. She tried to keep busy, to avoid facing the truth of what she had done. But every corner of their life together seemed to come alive with memories she could no longer ignore. The truth was, she hadn't just betrayed Tom, she had betrayed herself. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the thick silence that had settled in the room. She glanced at it, almost afraid to pick it up. But the message was from Alex. "I've been thinking about you. I miss you. Call me when you can." Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she was back in that hotel room, in his arms, where everything had felt right. But even as she thought about calling him back, she felt the weight of what was happening. What had started out as an escape from her own loneliness had turned into something far more complicated. Alex hadn't been the answer to her problems, just a bandage that covered a wound that was growing deeper the longer she ignored it. Samantha sank back into the couch, staring at the message. She should have felt relief, even excitement, but instead, all she felt was guilt. She had betrayed Tom, and now she was betraying herself again by even considering reaching out to Alex. She typed a quick response to Alex, her fingers trembling as she typed. "I can't do this anymore, Alex. I've made a huge mess of things." The words felt empty, hollow. She wasn't sure if they were a message to Alex or to herself. But she sent them, and then stared at the screen for a long time, as if waiting for some miraculous reply that might make everything okay again. But Alex didn't text back. And deep down, Samantha knew that he never could fix this. The next few days were a blur. Samantha spent most of her time in the apartment, trying to distract herself from the reality of what she had done. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the crushing weight of the betrayal or the loneliness that seemed to settle in with every passing hour. Her mind kept drifting back to Tom. She could still see his face when he had walked out the door, his shoulders hunched in defeat. His eyes, usually so warm and understanding, had been filled with something she hadn't seen in years: disappointment. He had looked at her like she was a stranger, and in many ways, that's exactly what she had become. She had done this, She had created the distance between them, and now she was living with the consequences. But Samantha couldn't bring herself to call him. She couldn't bring herself to even leave the apartment to look for him. She had destroyed everything, and even though a part of her longed to apologize, to beg him for forgiveness, she knew it would never be enough. She had broken his trust, and nothing she said or did could ever fix that. One afternoon, after days of silence, there was a knock at the door. Samantha's heart skipped. She had no idea who it could be, but she instinctively knew it wasn't Alex. She hesitated before answering, afraid of facing whoever stood on the other side. When she opened the door, she found herself face to face with Tom. He stood there, looking at her, as if he were trying to decide whether to walk away or step inside. His eyes were tired, his face drawn, but there was a softness there, something that made her stomach tighten. He was still wearing the same jacket he had left in, as if he hadn't even gone home yet. Tom didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders tense. The silence between them was thick, almost unbearable. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I've been thinking about everything," he said, his gaze not meeting hers. "About us, about you." Samantha's heart clenched. She didn't know what to say, what to do. Her mind raced, her words caught in her throat. She wanted to apologize, to explain everything, but she knew deep down that no words could undo what she had done. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Sam," Tom said softly, his voice breaking ever so slightly. "I don't know if I can go back to who we were." His words hit her like a punch. She wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to tell him that she loved him, that she had made a terrible mistake. But the truth was, she knew he was right. The person she had been had changed, and the trust they had once shared had been shattered beyond repair. "I understand," Samantha whispered, her throat tight with emotion. "I ruined everything. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I love you, Tom. I always have. And I'm so sorry." He looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Samantha stood there, her hand still on the door, watching him leave. The weight of his departure sank into her bones, a cold, unshakable feeling. It was over. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between them stretched on. Tom didn't come back. He didn't call. Samantha hadn't expected him to, but that didn't make the emptiness any easier to bear. She had pushed him away, and now she was living with the consequence. Alex's messages stopped coming too. Samantha had known, deep down, that he would be gone the moment she made her decision. And now, all she had left were the broken pieces of a life that once seemed perfect. Samantha spent her days alone, wandering through the empty apartment that had once been their home. Each room held a memory of something she had destroyed, a piece of her life that could never be returned. One evening, as she was sitting on the couch, staring out the window, she finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of it. The heartbreak, the shame, the loneliness. It all came crashing down on her. She had lost everything, and now she had no choice but to live with it. But maybe, just maybe, she thought, it was time to start rebuilding. Not with Alex, not with Tom, but with herself. If she could learn to forgive herself, maybe she could find a way forward.